I've been coming to the same boxing gym since I was a teenager. It is by far one of my favorite places in the whole world. It has always been a safe place for me, a place of growth and a place of learning. I'm a product of this gym as much as I'm a product of any institution. And that's saying something given the number of institutions that I have belonged to over the years. But everything about me that is worthy of praise has a basis in the boxing I learned as a youth and the boxing gym that took me in and introduced me to the sport. As I transitioned from student to employee to trainer to coach to manager of this very same gym, a lot of personal development took place. I went from almost being unemployable here to becoming an award-winning employee elsewhere. Maybe because I was starting from so stunted a beginning, or maybe because I was in the right place at the right time, surrounded by the right people. Either way, or both, I grew as a person in ways that were obvious, like learning to box, but also in less obvious ways. One such example is how I learned to write here, or more precisely, how I learned to write better here. Because institutionalized education, better known as school, failed me so utterly and completely as to leave me illiterate in comparison to other people my age. Whereas my boxing gym taught me how to write in a way that would see me earning praise in academic and professional settings many years later. I even had my writing published in newsprint media, all thanks to the learning environment that my boxing gym gave me that school did not. Boxing is a direct sport. Its purpose and the tools that it offers you to achieve that purpose are deceptively simple. Writing is at its core the same. Good writing should be direct. The joy in reading comes from how the tools of writing are wielded by the author, much as how the joy of boxing comes from how the boxer does the same thing. Again, deceptively simple. So deceptive that everyone thinks that they can do either activity. Until they try, that is. Even if I couldn't write myself, I could feel how reading fundamentally changed me with each new text absorbed. I didn't necessarily understand writing on a technical level, but I knew the joy that it brought me when I read anything that was subjectively good. I hadn't created an objective measure of quality, mostly because I didn't understand writing conventions. Still, I knew what I liked, and that was a start. Reading a well-written passage is not unlike seeing a boxer throw a beautiful combination in the ring. There's a flow to both of them, even if you can't quite label what's happening. You might not even understand how it's taking place. You just experience that flow vicariously. It takes you in, if only by proxy, but that's enough to appreciate it. I wanted to be able to do that with my writing as much as I did my boxing. I felt the pull that many writers do, and artists in general, to master the craft, to gain some capacity in it so as to contribute to the art. I felt the same thing with boxing, but that's a story for another day. Suffice to say, the gym itself wasn't necessarily a place for reading or writing. Or so I thought. That changed when the owner of the gym at that time bought a bulletin board that had a dry erase section on it, ostensibly to be used for gym messages and promotional materials. It soon became this place for me to experiment with writing, or what I thought was writing at the time. My grammar was non-existent. I wrote in an unstructured and undisciplined manner, none of which could be blamed on the medium in question. My education to that point had done less to prepare me for public writing than it had to prepare me for the workforce. My schooling had been an exercise in endurance, not intelligence. As in, I just had to get through. I didn't have to excel. I didn't even have to display a competency that would make me a candidate for being a contributing member to society later in life. By the time I was diagnosed with a speech impediment, and attempts were made to make me normal by the homogenous standards of the education system in those days, I was already considered a lost cause. So much so that teachers weren't even subtle about pointing it out to me from class to class, grade to grade, year to year. Sometimes cruelly in retrospect. I remember 3 distinct teachers who approached my scholastic challenges in 3 equally dismissive ways. The first, Mrs. Ferguson, told me I didn't even need to do well. I just needed to do enough to keep up with the class so that I could pass. The second, Mr. LaRue, told me that I should be sent back a grade, probably 2, so that I didn't continue to bring down the class average. It would be a benefit to all involved if I was dropped. The third, Mrs. Benson, told me I was the worst student she had ever had in one of her classrooms and that teaching me was a waste of time. I was 12 when Mrs. Benson told me that. That's despicable. Unfortunately, I believed her at the time. Not so much because I thought I was stupid, but because it never occurred to me to question if I was. All of these teachers kept pointing it out to me every time I asked for help. So I just accepted it. Sky is blue, grass is green, and I'm dumb. That's what school and the teachers in it taught me to accept about myself. As a result, school just became this social contract with society that I had to uphold. Go as expected, get by, get out ASAP. I wasn't smart enough for it, and it wasn't designed to help children like me. The compromise being that it didn't actively hold me back as long as I passively went along with it. I kept my expectations low. The schools and the teachers barely met them, and we all got along to get along. But a funny thing happened along the way. One of the biggest wastes of time that Mrs. Benson had ever had the unfortunate luck to cross paths with found extracurricular reading outside of the classroom and away from teachers' judgment enjoyable. Funny that. And in reading for enjoyment, I found self-directed learning, because reading for enjoyment has a way of educating the reader without distracting from the subject matter. I was learning how to write by reading, and years later, that would turn into written expression on a dry erase board in an inner city gym as I was learning to box. It started with replies to the contents of a suggestion box. Eventually, it evolved into me writing longer form essays about a variety of topics. Some, like training and dieting pieces, were obvious to the gym. Others, like dating and relationship advice, were less obvious, but equally well received. They often sparked conversation regardless of the topic, and they often gained me praise. People looked forward to what became unofficially known as Whiteboard Wednesday down at the gym. A new essay every week. That's all well and good, but how did that teach me to write better? It kind of sounds like I was doing okay, right? Wrong. My writing was atrocious. All I had going for me were some clever ideas and some good penmanship. The structure itself was a disaster. The grammar, non-existent. It almost rendered what I wrote unreadable. But it turned out the message was worth salvaging. So you know what the gym goers did? The boxers, the bodybuilders, the trainers, the coaches, they quietly corrected my essays on the whiteboard. They used markers to add periods, remove commas, or correct spelling. Nobody told me I was stupid. Nobody called me out in front of everyone else because I didn't know what a semicolon was. Nobody made me feel like I was a waste of their time. School did that. Boxing didn't. The people in the gym saw value in me in a way that teachers never did. And they went out of their way to encourage me without going out of their way to make me feel like a burden as they did it. I would write an essay on the dry erase board. People would make corrections. I would make notes of those corrections. And the next essay would have fewer errors. Just like how you would expect the school system to work, if it worked. But it doesn't. The result is that I was bullied by teachers who never should have been allowed to teach in a system that didn't know how to deal with the drop-off along the x-axis, over-rewarding the y-axis by getting them through the system relatively unscathed, while the underdeveloped minority trailed off in a scaling law distribution of learning. That shouldn't be allowed to exist if we truly care about the children that are in these learning environments. Luckily for me, the institution of boxing worked better than the school institutions I was in. Certainly as far as my boxing gym versus the schools that I attended is concerned. It was barely even a contest between them by any standard, qualitative or quantitative. Coaches cared more than teachers. Peers didn't care about the differences between us, from skin color to age to speech impediments. And by the time I was ready to leave the gym to take on new challenges in life, I was actually prepared to do so because my boxing gym had actually provided a place of learning, growth, and encouragement, to receive feedback and support in a judgment-free space with the tools to show my work and progress in a process of collaboration and stewardship. No matter how much I struggled, everyone here worked with me to figure it out, not just for boxing, but for writing as well. It's too bad schools don't offer something similar.